Okay, so we've come to the end of the training, and here we are at part 7, putting it all together. And yeah, so let's take a look here. We'll start with just a very quick review of the tour guide training. You'll recall that there have been a number of questions that you were asked with each one of the content areas for the training. And basically right here, I'm going to ask you how you would put everything together that you learned in this training to make sure your visitors have the best experience possible in the MCA. So, yeah. So the content areas, as you probably recall, Kosraean culture, history, and geography. We spent a lot of time there discussing maps, the history of Mahkontowe in terms of the cultural history of Mahkontowe, some of the general geography of the Mahkontowe Conservation Area, and its importance overall. And that was followed up and really highlighted in content area 2, where we talked about the environment and ecology, particularly interconnections between conservation of the MCA as well as subsistence practices for Kosraeans. And of course, this is knowledge that many visitors might not be aware of overall. Folks come from a variety of locations across the globe and have different perceptions of what conservation and resource management looks like. And so content area 3 takes a look at some of those differing perceptions in terms of conservation overall. It also just very briefly touches on trail maintenance and repair using hand tools, which is what many of the tour guides will have access to while you are working your way up in the forest and through the MCA and guiding visitors. Potentially to the summit of mountains, but not necessarily. Content area 4 looks at best practices in tourism. I talk a little bit here about issues of customer service, guest interactions, and visitor satisfaction. And finally, the last content area we look at is safety. So just being mindful of the policies and procedures and how these might change over time with the Kosrae state government, as well as agencies and even the tour operators that you might be employed with or for. So just being generally aware of that overall, and then thinking about how to keep your visitors safe and things that you can do both before the hike in order to prepare, having those 10 essentials, coming up with plans, contingency plans and ideas of how the hike is going to go, and just setting each of the visitors up for success as well as yourself. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with being prepared overall. So some of the ideas from how, overall. So in discussion with Kosraeans about these ideas and concepts about how to bring the visitor into the MCA and the experience overall, because of course, as I said earlier, it's about the MCA, it's about Kosrae, it's about seeing the natural beauty, the cultural wonders of the island of Kosrae, but it's also about the experience that you provide to the guests overall. And some of this is personal, so some of the ideas that came out from Kosraeans is personalize it, make it relevant to your own experience as a municipality. Introduce yourself to visitors and let them introduce themselves. Basically, this conversation about, well, why are you here? And let visitors know about the marine protected areas, and then into the MCA as well, and how those are interrelated with one another. You might also discuss entry points into the MCA in the different municipalities if a hike hasn't already been decided upon. Of course, weather conditions are also a consideration here. You might show certification of the trail guide training or the tour guide training, and then share an overview of the villages of Kosrae, general description of the island as a whole, and the key features that you can find as well as within the MCA. You might include more information about the MCA, including what it stands for, how it was developed by the communities as well as the government. You might look at and consider the discussion of the different zones of the area and how big it is, really. And I think guests and visitors will get a sense of the scale of it, particularly once they start climbing up, some of the mountains in the areas. And it's just right there, but then the hike actually starts, and so maybe a little bit different. And then the access roads overall. So the features of the MCA, what folks will generally see: cultural history, historic sites of Japan and Koshrai, cultures and traditional knowledge from elders, traditional aspects of the MCA, these interconnections that we talked about overall in the training, and then also discussion of the management of MCA by Koshrai State Government and other involved in MCA. Again, another idea: introduce yourself and then talk about the sleeping lady and the MCA. Talk about the hike itself, what it looks like. Maybe mention some features like the lowest cloud force in the world, the historical sites that folks will come across, medicinals, plants, trees, anything that might be poisonous, nothing for animals. You might want to check also with tourists in terms of medical conditions, limitations, and basically having a clear line of communication between you and them, so you know what's going on. Maybe the tourist didn't bring enough food with them, and maybe you can offer it along the way. You can also let the folks know that hiking can be dangerous. And the tour guide is basically an ambassador. They're bringing somebody who doesn't know very much about Koshrai, about the MCA, and basically you're showing people an entirely new area to them. Advise the guests on what they need to bring with them, developing a way to keep track of names, and then also a way to get feedback from guests. And again, that's good feedback, bad feedback. It's all helpful ultimately to make you a better tour guide. And then also thinking about how general awareness and potentially also promotional materials that could be developed by tour guides, collectively by tour operators, government overall. And so you might think about some of the different ideas that you have as well, what you might add to the list. If you do have questions for me, please do contact me by email. And I want to thank you for participating in the tour guide training.